Okay. So once again, good afternoon. My name is Srijita Dasgupta, and I work for an intergovernmental organization named CABI, where we very, very proudly work with our stakeholders, particularly farmers, helping them make a transition to green, resilient, and low emission pathways. I am a climate change and adaptation policy expert, and it is with great pleasure that I welcome you all to this side event on Bridging the Gap, Farmer-Centric Solutions for Effective Nationally Determined Contribution Implementation, jointly organized by CABI and the Adaptation for African Agriculture Initiative. Okay. So over the next hour or so, we will be knowing more from our speakers and panelists what farmer-centric adaptation solutions look like, the need for science and evidence for informed decision making at all levels, innovations in monitoring and tracking adaptations, and lastly, how collaboration and scaling can create desired impacts, all in support of achieving the Paris Climate Agreement. We have a great lineup of speakers today, and I am very much looking forward to the discussions. Okay, so today is a very, very important day at COP. It is the Food and Agriculture Day, and I know we have just been running around from one event to another, making sure we don't miss any of the exciting opportunities. Agriculture is at the forefront of climate impacts, especially in developing countries of Asia and Africa. The nationally determined contributions and the national adaptation plans have prioritized the agriculture sector, setting ambitious climate and agriculture goals, but translating these into effective farmer-centric solution is quite challenging, and that requires us placing the 510 million smallholder farmers at the center of every intervention. Now, the other aspect of this challenge is climate finance, because at the moment, only 0.8% of all climate finance goes to farmers. Out of the global climate finance scenario, we are talking about 90% of it going to just mitigation, so even less for adaptation. In view of that, adaptation being a sectoral priority, and to deal with the recent pace of climate change, adaptation responses also have to emerge more rapidly from being incremental to more transformative solutions with systems level impact. Another challenge, of course, is what I mentioned, is access to resources, capacity, knowledge, and technology, all of which we will now be hearing from our panelists. So moving on, these are just the objectives. So over the next few hour or so, we'll try to engage in an inclusive and interactive discussion on working with the common goal of transforming agri-food systems, and also try to understand and reflect on innovative solutions that address farmer needs and policy decisions across different subsectors in support of the NDCs and NAPs. And I'm really sorry, because obviously it's a little noisy here, so I got a little distracted, but hopefully we can deal with this. Okay. It is with now great pleasure that I would like to welcome Daniel Elgar, CEO of CABI, who would deliver a keynote speech on bridging evidence, science, and policymaking, insights from CABI's initiatives on Plantwise Plus and Juno.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Great apologies for not being there in person. Can I just check that
can
see
this
my
be taken
full
down?
screen?
Sorry, Daniel, yeah, okay. Are you sharing your screen?
I am sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Is this the first slide? I don't think it's the first slide.
No, it's not. You're quite right. You can see the full screen?
Now
right?
it works. Good. Excellent.
Okay, great.
I'll now hand it over
you.
to Daniel. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you, Srijita. Thanks also to the UNFDC, the Moroccan government, our collaborators, especially the African Agriculture Initiative, African Agriculture Initiative, And as you've already heard, this is a session very much focused on ensuring that key national climate plans, like the NDCs and national adaptation plans, drive, recognise and reflect local effort on adaptation. And I'm going to focus really on work to link national and local actions in support of adaptation and in making action at all levels, from the policy level down to the farm level, more informed by evidence. Hence the title of my section, which is Bridging Evidence, Policy and Practice. Now, to make this concrete, I'm going to illustrate this with two live programs. One, CABI's PlantWise Plus, that's all about translating evidence on best practice into action on a big scale. And the other, Juno, which is about providing better evidence to policymakers. So CABI is probably best known for PlantWise Plus, which is an initiative to sustainably improve farmers' yields and promote adaptation to climate change impacts. Now, this program began with plant clinics, really akin to human health clinics, as shown over on the left-hand side of this slide, where farmers could bring any crop problem with any pest or disease to a plant clinic to get an evidence-based diagnosis and advice from a plant doctor. And that plant doctor would be a public extension worker who had the benefit of additional training, resources and tools to support giving advice on climate-smart agriculture approaches based on the best possible evidence available. And that knowledge and resources that the plant doctor has at their disposal includes really up-to-date information on threats to crop health, so that the program is able to support adaptation in real time to evolving climate-related challenges like new pest and disease patterns. Now, importantly, looking over more to the right-hand side of this slide, information on the problems seen by the plant doctors and the advice that they give out are both captured into the national system. So that means there's continuous improvement of this service, and it can be linked with other initiatives, and data gathered can be used back to inform national policies and guidelines. So the program scaled up this clinic approach across more than 30 countries, and you get an idea from this build of the scale of that effort in terms of large numbers of plant clinics being established, huge numbers of plant doctors being trained to staff those clinics, and a very large-scale reach in terms of numbers of farmers benefiting from advice. And this was also shown to translate into real benefits to food security and livelihoods in various studies, including randomized controlled trials. Now, as the program has developed and evolved, we've complemented the clinic approach with other strands which work more explicitly across different levels within a country and are divided into three impact pathways that are shown here. And these are all about really strengthening the entire national plant health system. So the interventions under these impact pathways are not only at the farm level, but also at the policy and regulatory level. And there's a strong intention to link the action at those different levels. So as an example, starting over here on the left-hand side with pest preparedness, we've worked with national systems to generate and share early warnings of pest and disease upsurges, which of course are becoming a bigger problem because of climate change. But early warning is no use at all unless that information actually reaches farmers. So under the middle section here, we've worked on new ways to impart advice effectively, and my colleague Lydia will be talking about the suite of digital tools that we've developed to do that. But those digital approaches are also very important in bridging action at the policy and regulatory level to what's happening at the farm level. So as a quick example, CABI has developed the CABI Bioprotection Portal, which is a one-stop resource where growers and their advisors can find information on all of the nature-based solutions approved for a particular crop pest problem in their own country. And that's now launched in over 40 countries. And moving over to the right here, the strand on pesticide risk reduction, again, this is about action at the farm level with advice on more judicious use of toxic plant protection products, but also at the national and regulatory level. So, for example, we've worked with the government in Pakistan to pioneer an improved pathway for the approval of new, safer, nature-based plant protection products. So overall, you can see that this program really links action at the policy and the national level and work at the farm level to maximize overall impact. So, while PlantWise Plus is all about getting the best evidence to empower smallholder farmers and ensure that the policy and regulatory environment is supportive, what about at the policy level, where there's a need to address the lack of good evidence available to support decision making? And of course, that's vitally important in the context of countries developing and implementing their NDCs, NAPs, and other frameworks. So CABI has been a founder member of the Juno Evidence Alliance, which was launched last year as the world's first evidence synthesis network in the area of agriculture and food systems. And we work at the country and global level to identify needs for evidence and commission evidence and produce and publish high quality output. So 11 reviews and reports were produced last year during the pilot phase of this initiative. And beyond that, we also promote the use of evidence in decision making more broadly. And here we're really inspired by what's happened in healthcare over the last 30 years, where initiatives like the Cochrane collaboration have built a diffuse and diverse network worldwide of evidence synthesizers who produce evidence in response to demand. So built based on that precedent, we're working on evidence standards and on mentoring and training researchers worldwide to do evidence synthesis. Using AI has made it much more feasible to conduct this kind of initiative at scale when there are huge numbers of publications to consider when coming up with an evidence synthesis. And I should stress, this is a big tent initiative. While CABI is leading this, it's very much open to everyone interested in improving the evidence available to support policy making. So Juno is set up to deliver more and better evidence, and particularly rapid evidence syntheses. And I think the need for that is really clear when you look at the existing evidence syntheses that policymakers might rely on. And this is looking at evidence syntheses produced by SDG. And what you can see here is that climate action and food security are particularly poorly served with very few evidence syntheses and even fewer high quality ones compared to other areas like health and education, say. And that's a real problem considering the value of evidence synthesis in supporting all steps in an effective decision-making process by policymakers, from number one here at the top, understanding a problem and its causes, through selecting options for addressing that problem, considering what's likely to affect the success of interventions, and then finally seeing whether those interventions have actually worked. So evidence synthesis doesn't only allow a clear understanding of the balance of the evidence that's already available in a particular policy area, but it's also very good at highlighting gaps and biases in research. And one of Juno's key outputs during its first year has been the State of the Food report on agri-food systems, which was showcased by the UK government at the World Food Summit they hosted last year. And this showed that despite the fact there's been a huge growth in research publications in the agri-food systems area since 2010, very little of that research really relates to the poorest, hungriest, or most climate vulnerable countries. And so, for example, a country like Yemen, there are only 121 papers per million hungry people. And research on small and medium enterprises is also very lacking, and only a tiny fraction, only 8% of the global agri-food systems research relates to small-scale farming, which is an extraordinary indictment, really, of our current world literature. Now, as well as looking at those big global questions, to bring this back to a national level, JUNO is also, the evidence synthesis approach that's used in JUNO is also very well applied to quite specific policy challenges at a national level. So this is one example recently that we worked on with the UK FCDO in Nepal. And the great strength of the JUNO approach is that, as well as considering the peer review literature, it seeks to capture stakeholder perspectives and local knowledge, which was nicely illustrated by this project. So by capturing so-called grey literature and those stakeholder perspectives intentionally, we're able to go at least some way towards ameliorating biases against local and indigenous knowledge when ensuring that all of the available evidence is considered and made available to policymakers. So a few conclusions and take-homes. I think first, intentionally linking actions at the national or policy level with what's happening at the great grassroots level can obviously enhance systems level impact. We saw how PlantWise Plus seeks to pull through at a farm level advances achieved in national policies or regulations or infrastructure. And that's obviously relevant when we're thinking about developing and implementing national climate and development policies like NDCs and NMAPs. More broadly, better evidence is needed to inform policy in the climate and food systems arenas, and that's obviously important to optimize both mitigation and adaptation planning. More systematic evidence management of the kind supported by JUNO can help provide policymakers with the evidence they need. We saw how JUNO helps to make the most of the available evidence, including local and indigenous knowledge, and identify gaps in primary evidence. And clearly, that approach could support data-driven development of NDCs and NAPs and evidence-based implementation of those plans. And of course, finally, good evidence begins with good metrics for measuring things. And I appreciate this has been a real challenge in climate adaptation. It's a very live area of debate, with ongoing discussions on adaptation indicators, and especially this tension between having a short list of globally universal indicators versus a broader list or a richer menu with more scope to tailor to unique local contexts. And I'm sure that's something we'll hear more about from our other speakers. So with that, I'd like to say thank you and hand back to Srijita.
Thanks, Daniel, for the excellent inputs and for really highlighting some of the initiatives. And we can finally see you on screen. For highlighting some of the initiatives that CABI is driving, and the way we are really focused on farmers, but it's a lot of evidence and science that drives all our thinking towards our programs. So for the next segment, as Daniel said, it will be about adaptation tracking. On the 16th, we had a very insightful event in this pavilion with the International Platform for Adaptation Metrics, where we discussed the inherent challenges of tracking adaptation. But it is one of the key ways to really get all the resources in. For example, a consistent tracking allows us for better planning, resource allocation, and for policy refinement processes. With that framing in mind, I would now like to invite Dr. Riyad Balagi, Program Director for the African Adaptation Initiative, to show us how we are tracking the adaptation of the African agriculture systems, but at a national level. And to complement it very well, we'll hear it from our next speaker, Lucy Gujuna, who will be showing us how it's done at the grassroots level and how it can be linked back to the national level. So I'm very excited to hear from both of them.
Thank you, Srijita. Let me first of all presentation. Okay, thank you. Let me first of all present what is the African Agriculture Adaptation Tracking Tool before going at the national level. This tool was developed thanks to an initiative from the African Adaptation Initiative, and it was undertaken with the help of GCA, the Global Center on Adaptation, and in collaboration with CIAT, and the team for CIAT. It was funded both by CIAT and GIZ. And so this tool was developed to track adaptation in Africa. And so you tell me why the African Agriculture Adaptation Tracking Tool? Why this tool? Because we need digital resources to guide adaptation decision, first of all. The tool will be explained more by my colleague Lucy, which was the person who was part of the team who developed the tool. She knows it very, very well, more than me. And to support integration of climate smart strategies, because we developed this tool based on the climate smart investment plan developed by many institutions in Africa. And finally, to bridge the gap between policy and implementation. So the objective of this tool, it was designed to empower, of course, national governments in tracking and evaluating climate adaptation action in agriculture. So we focused on 10 countries in Africa, which have their own climate smart investment plan. Most of them was developed by the AAA initiative. And because this plan were available in this country, so we had the background information to start developing the tracking tool. So the primary objective of the tool is to integrate adaptation effort into national adaptation plan, as said by my colleague Srijita in the beginning, and national determined contribution. So the tracking tool strengthens the resilience of agriculture, a critical sector in African countries, as you know, and has climate access to climate finance. That's the end goal of that's one of the outcomes of the tool. So it's provide actionable data. You will see that Lucy will make a not demonstration, but she will show that support decision makers in designing effective policies and sustainable development strategies. So, in brief, about the methodology, the tool adopts a structured methodology to address national adaptation needs. Its core impacts are impact. The core of the system is an impact pathway to connect climate adaptation goal to measurable outcomes. That's the idea. That's the impact pathway that was designed at the beginning of the project. The pathway focused on reducing vulnerability, increasing adaptive capacity, improving food security. So the indicators were tailored to national context and are derived from global best practices and evaluated for relevance and feasibility. So we relied on the huge database available at CIAT on the indicators. There are many indicators. So the idea was from this set of indicators to select the best way to track adaptation at various levels, spatial level for the agriculture sector. So the idea was to enable governments to assess progress systematically and to refine strategy based on real-time data. So have to feedback from the ground and to refine strategy based on the signals sent by these indicators. Sorry. So the role in the policy implementation. What is the role of the tracking tool? You tell me, Srijita, if I'm late. So at national level, because that's the focus of my presentation. At the national level, the tracking tool serves as a bridge between policy formulation and implementation. That's the idea. So we hope that it will achieve this kind of objective. It embeds the adaptation metrics within agricultural strategy, ensuring that they align with broader environmental and climate goals of the country. So the tracking tool strengthens the capacity for systematic data collection and reporting. The idea is not only data collection but reporting also. We took an example. We make a deep dive in one of the program of the Moroccan strategy, in the framework of the Green Generation, called the Green Generation 2020-2030, and we take the example of the no-till system, which was upscaled over Morocco, covering 1 million hectares towards 2030. That was the idea. So it was a real project that we used as an example to deep dive the tracking tool. To the indicators at the national level, what are they? They are the central indicators are central to AAA tracking tools utility at the national level. They track climate hazards, they track agricultural activities resulting socioeconomic impacts. I take an example. They measure rainfall variability, adoption rates, climate smart practices. So a various set of indicators that provide information on adaptation. Also improvement in soil health and crop yields. These metrics they offer critical insights into how adaptation efforts translate into resilience. So from the activities to the outcome. What are the future directions? Well, what could be potential development of this tool in the future at national level? So, as I said, it should allow to refine policies, but also to build capacity and expand its scope. The tool can continue to provide data-driven insights that enhance NAPs and NDCs while informing sustainable investment strategies. That's the idea. Capacity building efforts will ensure that the policymaker, researcher, and local stakeholders are equipped to use the tracking tool. That's another story, another task for the future, for Lucy and his team. It's her team. Additionally, the tool scalability and will allow integration with other sectors. That's another story, such as water and forestry, that are closely linked to agriculture. Of course, in order to have a holistic view of resilience. So at the end, I think the idea, it's my point of view, is to establish a robust national-owned system that enable countries to track progress, meet international commitments, all the Paris Agreement commitments, and drive sustainable adaptation efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Riyadh, and over to you, Lucy. 5.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Riyadh, for starting off the presentation. So the tool that Riyadh mentioned is an online tool. So I'll give you the website that you can be able to access the tool later on in the presentation, so that you can actually be able to see some of the functionalities that Riyadh was mentioning. So my name is Lucy Njuguna. I work for the Alliance of Biodiversity and SEAT based in Nairobi. I focus mostly on work related to how to develop and roll out methods for measuring progress in adaptation. In the keynote speech, we had about how it's very critical to develop methods, indicators that can actually enable us to measure how we are making progress in adaptation. Of course, this is very critical in informing policies and at the same time in making sure that investments are actually being directed towards towards solutions that have already been tested and can be effective in helping us respond to climate risks. And here I've listed the team members that I work with in this work, and we collaborated in creating the tool that Riyadh has just mentioned. Srijit already mentioned also why adaptation tracking is important. So I'll keep using adaptation tracking, and it's similar to monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So I hope I won't lose anyone on the terminology. But here I just wanted to highlight some of the work that we do, in which case the tool that Riyadh has just mentioned is one of the key tools that we developed to make sure that we are building the capacities of stakeholders to be able to have access to methodologies that allow them to track adaptation. A few examples here, and if you have access to the slides, which I can share later on, you can be able to access the links and see the products that we've worked on. But just a few examples is myself, for instance, supporting, I'm one of the 78 experts supporting the work on GGA indicators. We've worked looking at adaptation tracking elements in African NDCs and NAPs, because this we consider to be a strong foundation that should be informing even how we go ahead and develop a framework for tracking adaptation at the global process. So we make sure that we are continuously surfacing this evidence to inform ongoing conversations on adaptation tracking. And of course, generally, we focus on 3 areas, so covering areas around methods, indicators, and data, as well as continuously building the capacities of stakeholders to be able to track adaptation. Which gets me to the work that Riyadh has mentioned that we did with very fantastic collaboration with AAAI. And this project had 2 components. So there's the component that Riyadh has already mentioned, which is the second component there, that was specifically looking at developing tools for tracking adaptation. So we looked at climate smart investment plans of African countries, and looked at what priorities have been included there, develop impact pathways, and that became the foundation for us even to develop indicators that can be used to track adaptation components within the climate smart investment strategies. But once you already have the indicators and the tool for tracking adaptation in place, you also need the data, right? You need data for you to be able to operationalize those indicators, to be able to understand, based on the indicators that you've set forth and the priorities that you've included in your climate smart investment plan, how can you get access to data that then allows you to even measure those indicators? So we had this second component, which is where I will focus, because once you go to this website, so it's the tool, you can access it through africanagricultureadaptation.org. That is the web page for the tool. So the link is right here. And the tracking tools component is very straightforward. You just go click on the 3rd component of that dashboard, and it will take you directly where there's an explanation of what is an impact pathway, how do you develop an impact pathway, and it even takes you to the database of indicators that we have developed. But we had this component that was then more about surfacing the evidence of which actors are implementing adaptation within the African continent, with whom are they operationalizing adaptation projects, and what type of results have been achieved. And to do this, we've always tried to use methods and approaches that can actually be scaled out easily. So for example, we focus on using Google Forms to be able to extract information from different projects. And here we were looking especially at evidence that is already available online. So looking, for example, at project reports, project websites, to go back and extract specific information. For example, looking at what types of adaptation interventions have been promoted through those projects, which partners are working on those projects, which are the beneficiaries, and even disaggregating further to say, were they farmers, pastoralists, in which locations, looking at the budgets and so forth. So by using a Google form, it's very easy. For example, if another partner in another continent or in countries that were not covered in the first round, they can easily use the same template to go and extract additional information. And this can be integrated into the tracking tool, right? So then this information is already integrated into the tool. This part of the tool you access using the same link to the site that I mentioned before. And you can see, for example, based on just six months of work, we already mapped more than 600 projects and mapped over 1,300 actors that are collaborating in different type of projects. And you can see the locations that were mapped during that time. And this was looking at the project period between 2015 and 2023. Again, this is another functionality. So besides looking at the locations where the projects have been mapped, you can be able to see which actors are collaborating, what exactly they are doing, and what types of interventions. And you can see even the density of their connections. Again, this is just additional information that you can get in-depth description of the actors and what they are doing. And here it's a bit more of information in relation to the beneficiaries and even the budgets that were allocated to the project. So I'm moving very quickly because I have a few more things to cover, but this was just to show that this is a very rich tool that you can go in and get access to a lot of information. So you get support in terms of how to develop your own tools for tracking adaptation, but you also get access to a lot of evidence on what is happening in terms of adaptation within the continent. But then bringing in this very critical aspect for this session in relation to developing tools that actually give us access to information on what is happening at the farm level. We've also designed another tool that was much more focused on enabling governments to collect evidence and report internationally. So linked to the mandate to report on adaptation under the Paris Agreement. And the tool itself, it's focused on the livestock sector, but it was developed with insights from the livestock keepers themselves. So we wanted to understand, in addition to the priorities, for example, that have been captured in NAPs and NDCs, what are the livestock keepers themselves doing in terms of adaptation? Looking at what particular adaptation priorities they have for themselves and what adaptation ambitions do they have, and how can we then develop indicators that capture those ambitions and priorities. And these were integrated into the tool to then develop dashboards that the tool itself has about 96 indicators that are capturing adaptation across national, subnational, and farm level. And then once you input the data, so for example, the data that is from the tracking tool, you can then be able to observe progress in adaptation across space and time. The tool itself at the moment is focused on Kenya, Uganda, and Ethiopia, but we are happy to engage in conversations, as Riyad was mentioning, how to scale out some of these tools that we've already tested and we've seen the approaches are working. But then I wanted to mention this last bit because, for example, when we worked with the tracking tool, it mainly looked at data that was available online. So data that can only be accessed from the websites. With the second tool that I've mentioned that focuses on the livestock sector, it's mostly looking at data that is coming from the government. So then how can we actually complement these efforts to get data that is coming from the farm level, especially capturing farmer experiences with adaptation? So we have this new project that we've just started, and I think it has a lot of complementarities with what the CEO was mentioning at the beginning about evidence synthesis, because we have a three-pronged approach. So we are looking at doing evidence synthesis of available data, looking at journal publications, project reports, to be able to assess what adaptation actions have been implemented, further look at how effective they have been in helping communities respond to climate change, and then make this data readily available using living evidence synthesis. So the synthesis, the living evidence synthesis will be a live dashboard that different stakeholders can input data. So it won't be just through our systematic reviews, but we can also encourage, for example, NGOs to upload their data on M&D And this will be complemented by the second component that will be looking at improving data collection efforts. So for example, how can we systematize data collection protocols that include better aspects of adaptation so that it's feeding back to the data availability component. And then this will then be complemented by the third component, which will be looking at capacity building. So how can we continuously train more stakeholders to be able to use the improved tools for tracking adaptation, again going full circle to feed into better evidence on adaptation. So these are just some components to show how we can actually integrate adaptation evidence at the national level, looking at what is happening at the subnational level, and then improve how we can actually be able to capture adaptation progress at the farm level. So thank you, and happy to unpack some of these details in the Q&A.
Thank you, Riyadh and Lucy, for highlighting two very different tools at very different levels with different data needs, but I'm sure with different challenges and opportunities, which we will unpack in the next panel discussion. So it's with great pleasure I now would like to welcome on stage Dr. Riyadh Balaghi, Program Director for the AA Initiative. We have already met him. Lucy, Adaptation and Policy Expert from CIAT. Ifelua Olawato from the Ban Ki-moon Center. And she has her own climate smart enterprise, which we will hear more about very shortly. Lydia Gatere, Climate and Soil Expert from CABI. And lastly, Irish Bagilat from the Asia Farmers Association and representing Asia, a region very close to my heart. All right, so I'll start with Riyadh. Now that we have just had a session on tracking adaptation and some of the challenges, you have a very innovative tool, and you said data is key to really help track and monitor. How are you ensuring that good quality data is being captured, and how is the reporting done, and how do you see the linkages with the national level and the farmers level to ensure that tracking and monitoring is effectively done in favor of the Paris Agreement?
Thank you. To ensure that they are effectively tracking adaptation is not guaranteed. But there are some good practices, I think, to at least have a good level of certainty that these indicators are useful. Mm-hmm. I think the first of the quality of this kind of tool, it should be designed to have co-designed indicators. So indicators that means something for the farmers and at the same time means something for the governments, and indicator that can go from the local environment to the national level, mm-hmm. and go and forth in this way. There should be also participatory data systems that are understood by the farmers, the communities, so that they can inform properly the system and the database. And at the same time, this information should be relevant for national wrap-up and inform strategies and participate to the national objective and the global objective. Third, there should be communication and feedback from the ground to refine the indicators when used, and to assess whether they are relevant over time and in different scales and for different communities. I think that's very important. Of course, we should rely on new technology and innovation. The fantastic tool developed by Lucy and the CIAT team is something incredibly easy to handle, I think, and I think it could be easily scaled up, especially and in terms of project also. And of course, at the end, the training and capacity building. That's something we started a little bit in Morocco and in Kenya, but I think we should put more efforts on capacity building to let people know about it, use it, and give us feedback that could maybe inform us on how to further improve the tool. Thank you.
Thanks, Riyad. So what I've heard is the need for quality indicators, participatory action, community-driven, feedback loop, and capacity building, access to capacity building. I think that very well summarizes all the challenges we have. And I have a very similar question to Lucy on this. Along the same lines, like how do we ensure, that data is effectively captured? But more along the lines you said about your new initiative, and you mentioned the need for quality and improved data collection methods. How are you ensuring, or are there any examples of collaboration that has worked or scaling up that has worked where you were able to capture data from farmers that has led to an intervention at a national level to be very successful?
Okay, thank you for that question. Yes, I can say that this is building on some of the initial experience we had, and we are building a lot for the new initiative that I mentioned. We are building a lot on the experience working with Triple AI on this tool, because as I mentioned, just over 6 months, we were able to actually get access to a lot of data that was looking at more than 1,000 stakeholders, for example, looking at so many projects, and we have a lot of data in the tool already. So covering the 10 countries that we are working with that already had CSIPs. So this is already showing that if we actually have more collaboration, making sure that we can provide different stakeholders a way to consolidate their data. We already have a lot of data from Project M&Ds. We have a lot of activities that are going on adaptation. So it's a question of how can we actually be able to bring this data together to then have a more comprehensive understanding of how adaptation is progressing. But at the same time, we recognize that actors also use different types of methodologies. They are collecting data on different types of indicators. So it's also how we can be able to give support for them to improve and have some sort of coherence in their methods. We know, for example, research organizations, when they are doing trials on different agronomic practices, they're already collecting also a lot of data. They use specific methodologies. So then how can we make this a bit more tailored and made accessible, so that even when, again, we have new cycles of data collection, we're actually improving. And how we are planning to do this is we are planning to develop a methods wiki. So similar to how you have a Wikipedia, you can Google and then get specific information. So you can go to this site, and then it gives you a description of different types of methods, and you can select the method that is most suited for you depending on where you want to track adaptation. So, and we plan to consolidate methods that are being used by research organizations. If it's even looking at systematic literature reviews through evidence synthesis, how can we build on best practice? And again, we know at the farm level, we can also be able to access this data. So it's even working with, for example, with the initiatives that was being mentioned with the Juno evidence collaboration. So how can we actually tap into the evidence that is coming through these channels? So we need, I think, to have a more concerted effort so that as much as adaptation tracking is starting to move into the mainstream, how can we minimize the fragmentation so that we don't have different people doing different types of collation of evidence, but we try and bring it back together so that we have a more comprehensive understanding of adaptation. Yeah.
Thank you, Lucy. I'll now move on to Ife. And Ife is doing some amazing work running a climate smart enterprise with farmers, where she's helping them access climate smart inputs for better resilience. So my question to you really is, you have heard about these tools and you're doing some excellent work on ground. As you think of scaling up and then as you think of resilience, where do you see the gaps in really having your actions on ground, but then relating it to what is what is a government priority, government in terms of climate and development in your area of work, in your country, for example, and yeah, any challenges or opportunities you have been faced with as you scale up.
Thank you very much, Sridita, for the introduction, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ifeoluwa from Nigeria, and I'm the founder of Farm-Centric Technologies. I'm with the Ban-Ki-moon Center for Global Citizen as an agri-champion. And majorly what we do at Farm-Centric Technologies is we support smallholder farmers with climate resilient solutions, majorly focusing on access to financing that helps them to finance solar pumps, solar irrigation system, or improved seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, ameliorants that are drought resistant, or also helping them with agronomic support to combat flooding and every other climate disasters. And we are leveraging artificial intelligence to be able to track crop development within these farmers' cultivation cycle. We also use blockchain technology to make sure that there's smart contracting between the financier and the farmers, majorly. So responding to the question when it comes to scaling, I would first pick the challenges that we had and how it relates to how we should be able to properly track the performance of these interventions that we're giving to farmers for climate adaptation. And the challenge we had initially was being able to get the right data, quality data, to be able to formulate the right business model or supply chain infrastructure that would support the innovation that we are bringing to the farmer. So just to give a context to that, my work started with farmers because I wanted to change my local food system. I lost my dad to type 2 diabetes, which is a food-related illness, and I wanted to then work with farmers to be able to cultivate safe and nutritious food. And then starting working with the farmers, then we realized that the issue of climate change started. Some farmers lost their farm produce to flooding. There were some that their yield reduced drastically because of drought. And so it means that what we needed to prioritize is the support to make sure that these farmers are able to properly adopt and good practices and adapt to the impact of climate change. So it then meant that we were going to create a solution, but the solution we were going to curate, we had no data. I mean, farmers lost certain crops to certain disaster, but we couldn't tell to how much. I mean, what would it have been if there were proper assessment, and if it never happened? You know, we couldn't just really get the data to be able to say, okay, this is to the extent that these farmers are being impacted, and this is the kind of innovation that we are going to bring, how affordable, how adoptable would it be for the farmer. So we had issues with that data initially, and the other issue that we then had was policies. I mean, we know that mitigation is it's general, it's broad, but adaptation is very local, it's contextual. It happened region by region, and to some extent, it's not standardized. So because there are no standards to which these could be measured, there were no we didn't know what regulatory stance we needed to bring into the picture when it comes to, building our solution. So majorly it pushed us towards, we would rather prioritize what we think is important for the farmers. The two top lists for them is access to finance, access to market. When we give them access to finance and try to channel them to proper fair market, then it basically solves the problem. And then when tools like the adaptation tracking tool then comes into play from SEAT and from this experience, we are then able to also be part of that methodology outcomes and learn through that process, and also get more data to help us with our procedure. So majorly those were the issues. Then we now decided that we'd rather use technology, because technology is everywhere, and technology allows us to scale properly, and artificial intelligence comes into the picture where there's satellite monitoring for all the farms that we invest in. For example, when we get funds from the financiers, we invest in certain farms. When we invest in the farm, we make sure that these farms, we are monitoring them remotely with satellite monitoring services, geospatial data services, meteorological data to tell us about the weather performance, the expected cultivation calendar and harvest calendar, to then make those decisions to how much we're able to give to the farmer, how much the farmer can absorb, obviously, and how much the return on investment would be for the financier at the end of the day. So we majorly leveraging technology for us to scale.
Okay, thank you, Ife. Very good inputs, and you have very well actually framed my next question from my dear colleague Lydia. So CABI believes in technology and making technology accessible to farmers. So we have a whole suite of tools where for plant health and pest management problems. For the farmers. Could you elaborate a little more on how we are using those technologies for the farmers to build the resilience, how scale up is usually done in CABI, and is it linked to the policy and the government stakeholders that we work on in the different countries? Thank you.
Thank you, Srijita. So CABI employs 3 different ways of how to deal with the pest and different pest problems. One of them involves, rapid recognition and identification of the newly arrived pest. The second one is usually identification of already an existing one, which poses a threat from an external, from externally. And the third one is usually on the predicting of the timing of already a pest which is already in the country. So normally with these 3 different approaches, as my colleague said, Daniel, about the plant clinics, one of it is about the farmers being able to go to the nearest center where there is a plant doctor who has been trained in terms of being able to not only give recommendations but also be able to identify the pest. And that involves a system where the researchers, the input suppliers, the farmers, and the government also work together in terms of being able to identify a particular pest and being able, or a disease, to be able to actually work with it. The next one, in terms of identification of a potential threat, that one involves 3 technologies or 3 methodologies, and the 3 ones being horizon scanning tool. The horizon scanning tool is a website where it's a collection of a very detailed database that has a lot of pests and diseases which are collected in one area. And you can use different filters to be able to know, to identify the different ones depending on the country or depending on the region. And you have also recommendations that go with them. This is a collection which has been done by many researchers, and many even farmers themselves are helping us to actually be able to collect that. Going now to the next one is what is called the pest risk analysis. That's also another tool which has mostly been employed by the national plant protection organizations. And that one is also used in terms of analyzing which pests are already a risk in the country, which are also they could be in the neighboring countries, but they have a potential of entering into the countries. And especially this one has helped a lot in terms of working through trades and the value chains, and especially with the farmers being able to actually, for them to be able to direct farmers in what way can they be able to handle this pest. The third one is actually insight reporting, and these are weekly or monthly reports that come in terms of what would happen if this risk comes about, what are the probability of this external threat, how can it be treated, and how can it actually be worked on. And then the third way that CABI also looks at the pest is in terms of predicting the timing of an already existing problem. This one is usually through a tool called pest risk analysis, pest risk service information price. And this one usually use the data models from the world climate in terms of predicting if this happens, if these are the variable of the climate, what happens then to the potential threat of a pest. And this one has actually been adopted by so many countries, and some of them very actively is Ghana, Kenya, Malawi, and Zambia. They actually use this price. When we look at the other one, which is PRL and horizon scanning tools, what happens is that we find that some of these climatic regions could be similar, but from a different country. So you'll find that some of the countries might look at, let's say, for instance, the mango mealybug. The mango mealybug is not yet present in Kenya, but it's present in the neighboring countries. What are the potential for that pest already coming in to be able to establish itself in that? So with all this, the these tools are usually employed and usually established within the different the ministries, and because Kabi is an intergovernmental organization, it works with the national governments in terms of employing these technologies into their systems, and it helps them with the policy formulation.
Yeah, thanks, Lydia.
Yeah, thanks, Lydia. I think very good perspectives on how digital tools are being managed in Kabi to help farmers. I would now like to ask Irish from the Asia Farmers Association. I know the Asia Farmers Association has been the voice of the Asian farmers in many of these negotiations and COP, but you have heard a lot of perspectives from from African region, from our African colleagues. Do you think, in terms of scaling, impact, and resilience building for farmers, and then to achieve the climate goals, are the challenges similar, or do you think are there cross learnings to happen between the two regions, and how best do you think these challenges of knowledge sharing through knowledge platform, for example, the ASEAN CRN, the Agnes, how do we achieve that?
Yes, thank you, Shrujita, and thank you also for inviting AFA in this very informative session and allowing us to share also our perspective. Before I respond to your question, I would just want to mention that AFA, as a regional network of farmers organization in Asia, we are actually working closely with other regional farmers organization, including in Africa, in Latin America, and also we are part of a farmers constituency here in COP that brings together different farmers organization across the globe. So before I respond, I just wanted to make some comment about the monitoring or measurement MRVs on related to NDC. So yeah, I think one that we can share is an experience in Vietnam, where they were able actually to achieve tier 3, which is involving farm level data, because they work closely with organized groups. We know in Vietnam that they are well organized at the commune level, village level, up until the national level, and I think this is what we can contribute as farmers organization. For example, AFA, if individually we have like 11 million members across Asia, and if countries, research institutions actually work with us when it comes to data gathering, then we can have, we can contribute to a more meaningful information that guides policy and decision making. When it comes to, of course, challenges of small scale farmers, as mentioned, we are part of this global platform together with our colleagues in Africa. And yes, we agree that decision makers, financial institutions, research centers need to while there is recognition of our capacity, we need more. We expect more recognition as actors in achieving climate action. And there are opportunities. Small-scale farmers are being recognized more and more as investors as well. We invest in our farms, even though we are impacted by climate change, but we tend to recover with our own resources. There are more and more opportunities that small-scale farmers are recognized as innovators. For example, ICRA, for example, through this transformative partnership platform, where they have invited us to be part of the steering committee. I mean, there's opportunities opening doors for farmers organization to be involved even in global research, data collection, and of course in the transformation of the food system. So yes, inclusive platforms at national level, global level is allowing us to contribute to achieving climate action.
Thank you, Irish. And I think you have brought in a very important point here. We talked a lot about adaptation, but I think it's also important that to acknowledge that it cannot happen without mitigation. So the example from Vietnam is very good, and it also shows the priorities of the Asian countries as they're moving towards low emission and resilient agricultural practices through the MRV development processes. With this, I would now like to open the floor for a few questions. Okay. Do we have a mic?
Thank you. I am Jacqueline Sauzier. I represent a private association in Mauritius called the Mauritius Chamber of Agriculture. I'd like to know if the tool that it has been developed, if it can be opened up to countries that were not listed in your program, and specifically for an island state where we are just small island from 70 kilometers by 45 kilometers, if that would be helpful for us also. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question and the interest in the tool. The answer is yes. Because as I showcased in one of the slides, the templates that we developed that enable you actually to take stock of which projects are being implemented, like in your country, they actually can be applied across the board. And the fact that we are using very simple Google Forms, it's very low tech, so you don't need high expertise. It's simply going through the form and then answering specific questions. So it making it very adaptable to different contexts. And then we can give you the technical support to be able to create dashboards that will then help you analyze different types of data. If you're interested in trends, if you're interested in specific variables, that's the part then we can be able to provide the technical support to establish a tool that is probably designed for your country or within the region if there is interest. So the basic answer is yes. Yeah.
Any further questions? One more? Yes.
Since there are no other questions, I'll go through CABI now. I know that Mauritius has been working a little bit with CABI, but I tend to think that if CABI had a permanent person resident in Mauritius, the activities would be much more impactful and much more necessary would help more the planters. Would CABI be able to think of having someone represent them here in Mauritius? Not here, but as you understand, in Mauritius. Thanks.
Sorry, I've just intercepted the mic from Lydia, but we actually have the Director General from CABI. So if I would, yeah. Yes.
Thank you very much. Yes, I work for CABI, and we are increasingly, CABI is Mauritius is one of our member countries of CABI, and yes, we're working there, and we're increasingly looking at establishing a local footprint in these countries. And I think 2 months ago, we had a number of people visit Mauritius, and that is a testimony to the fact that we are looking to just doing that. So thank you. We are considering that. A quick question now that I have the microphone. I think they always say prevention is better than cure. So yes, we can adapt, we can do all these things. But how do we help our farmers to predict these situations before they really happen? And to what extent are they amenable in taking up those ideas so they're able to be better prepared to adapt to the issues when they occur? Prediction.
Does anybody want to quickly respond to that? We have 2 minutes to wrap up.
Maybe me?
I want to respond just very quickly. So yes, of course, if there is that opportunity where farmers, small-scale farmers, can actually get hold of weather information at the right time, why not? But in there are of course local weather, forecasting, but it's in a small scale, and this is, I think, what we really need to scale up. There are existing initiatives, but the investment is very much not enough to scale it up. And I just wanted to raise the question of access. While yes, there are also existing initiatives bringing like satellite, formation at the satellite level, but the question has always been our access to it. And I think this is not just for Asia, but for our friends also in other regions. It's always access to this information that we really need to address.
Can I just
Very briefly.
30 seconds to Riyadh, 30 seconds to Lydia then, and then Ife. 30 seconds, please. Very brief.
Okay. I don't know if you had the chance this morning to attend a meeting on weather services, climate services. The idea of this morning event was to showcase some successful examples on how we collect information, weather information, satellite information, how we transform this information into something that's usable by the farmers, like crop calendars, like crop forecasting, and so on. So this is not simple. Of course, it needs some expertise, it needs some infrastructure, and it needs some capacities, scientific capacities and technical capacities. But there exists a lot of solutions that are low cost, because developed on open source solution, and that you use also open source data, like the Copernicus data. But at the end, you need something that can use this data and transform it in something that can be helpful.
The other way is also advisory tools, which are usually available. And Kabi has a philanthropy of a lot of tools which can be used by farmers. There are periodic ways of educating the farmers, educating the input dealers also, educating extension officers also in terms of prediction and prevention. And also in also Kabi we have the e-academy, which is available and free to everybody who needs to be trained, and it can be the train can be done to anybody at any skill. So there are these different ways of we can engage the farmers in terms of knowing how to predict and how to prevent. Thank you.
Okay, so part of what we also do, beyond just monitoring the farms, because of course we have investment on the farm, the satellite imagery services and the information we get from it, we make sure that we share it with the farmer. So it's transparent enough and it is localized. So they receive this farm intelligence in their local languages. Whatever they're able to make out of this data also helps them in preparation for the whole cultivation, pest infestation, and the likes of that. So essentially, these services are available, but democratizing it and making them accessible is what we then need to talk about.
Yeah, thank you. And the interest of time, I think we have to wrap up now. And if Daniel is still online, I would really want him to close the session. But I think the message is quite clear that we have a lot of solutions, we have a lot of interventions, but they're rather fragmented at the moment, and there is a need to bring them together, to collaborate, and that was really the intention of this session. Daniel, are you online?
I am.
Okay, excellent. You have 1 minute.
Okay, in which case I will just thank the UNFCCC again, the Moroccan government for hosting this, Dr. Riyad, and also colleague Karim Anagay from the Adaptation of African Agriculture Initiative, Srijita for a great job in moderating, and Lucy, Ife, Lydia, and Irish for fantastic collaborations. Just to agree with what you've said, there are obviously tough challenges in implementing and tracking successful adaptation interventions, but collaboration between stakeholders at all levels, farmers, policymakers, organizations, can go some way towards overcoming the challenges. in areas like data accessibility, financing, scaling up grassroots innovations. And I wrote down very briefly, I'm a fan of alliteration, so 3 Ps: proper, pragmatic, and participatory. So I was inspired by the fact that people are seeking to do things very properly with great rigor. We saw that in the tools and approaches discussed today. Pragmatism, very important, using existing data, using what we already know to the most. And finally, participatory, vital that there is, that if we're going to have meaningful and own interventions, that there's full involvement of the people at the sharp end of climate change. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel. And thank you, everyone, for your attention and for joining the event.